Hello everyone and welcome back to Miss Key's Classroom. In today's video I am going to be sharing with you how I teach a novel to my class. It's currently school holidays here in South Australia, and one of the many things that I have to prep for these holidays is the novel that I'm going to be teaching to my Year 8s next term. And so I thought it was a good time to share the strategies I use when teaching a novel to my class, because I know that when I was first starting out as a teacher, I was always very nervous when I was teaching a novel because I never sort of knew where to begin. So hopefully you'll be able to use some of these strategies in your own class. But for now, thank you so much for joining me for this video, and let's get straight into it. So the first way you can structure the reading of the novel is by using reading groups. Either you can get the students to choose their own groups, or you can assign students to groups. Usually I find that assigning students to groups is the most effective way, because sometimes when students choose their own groups, some groups are really effective and others just get off task really easily. So what I tend to do is I get students to maybe nominate one or two other people in the class who they'd like to go with, and then I create the groups from that. That just means that there's a mix of abilities, there's a mix of students in each group, and it gives students a chance to get to know other people in the class and get comfortable reading in front of people that they're maybe not super close with. I tend to keep groups quite small, so maybe 4 or 5 students depending on my class size. And again, that just makes students feel more comfortable, because when they are reading, they're reading in front of a smaller group of students. I've used reading groups in the past when I've had a smaller class. It can be quite tricky if you do have a big class, because then you're trying to manage lots of different groups. But I find reading groups are really effective because, one, it gets the students reading the book out loud to other people, and 2, it gives the students an opportunity to chat in small groups about what they've read, and I really like that element of reading groups. I guess one negative aspect of reading groups is that it does take a very long time to get through the novel, and not all groups will read as quickly as one another, and so you might end up with a group that's finished the novel quite a few lessons before everyone else has. So that's just something to bear in mind. I would generally recommend reading groups if you've got quite a short text, so maybe you're doing a short story rather than a novel, or you are doing quite a short novel, because then it just means that each group, there's not that much opportunity, I guess, for groups to speed that far ahead, because the text is quite short and it's easy for everyone to keep up to the same point, if that makes sense. So there are definitely benefits of reading groups, and I have used them in the past. But this year I've got quite a large class and I've got a bit of a longer novel, and so for me reading groups just aren't going to work because it's going to take us too long to get through the text. But if you've got a smaller class or a shorter novel, like I said, reading groups can be a really good option. The second way that you can choose to structure your reading is individually. So getting students to read independently, whether that be at home or in class, and doing it as sort of like silent reading, then that can be a really good way to make sure that everyone is reading the novel. Obviously, when teaching a novel, you have to put a certain amount of trust in your students that they've read the book, and so doing independent reading can be one way to do that. I guess that the downside of that is that they don't really have that opportunity as they're reading to chat amongst themselves about what's happening in the novel, and they also don't get to hear the book being read. And so hearing the book out loud can be really helpful for some students, because they can imagine what's happening a little bit more, and sometimes we can't do that if we're just reading in our heads. But independent reading is another way that you can structure the reading of the class novel. And then the last way is you can read as a class, whether that be you reading to the class or nominating different students to read to the class. I think if you are going to get students to read to the class, one thing you've got to bear in mind is that not everyone's going to be at the same level, and not every student is going to feel comfortable reading to the whole class. And so I think that's when knowing your students really well comes into play, and knowing which students you can call on to read, and maybe which ones you could just get to read half a page or something like that. And so you can definitely differentiate still when they are reading to the whole class. Or maybe if you've got a student, say, who's got dyslexia, and you know that reading to the class is going to be a real struggle for them, give them the option and say, hey, I would really love it if you gave it a go, but would you like to pass this time, and maybe give it a go next lesson. So just being aware of the different reading abilities in your class is really important if you are going to get students to read out to everybody. But the way that I am going to structure my reading this term with my Year 8s is I'm going to read the novel to the class, and then I'll call on student volunteers if anyone else would like to read, because there might be some students who are really keen to and others who aren't. So one benefit of reading the book yourself to the class is that you get through it quite quickly. If you have students reading, some might read at a different pace, like I said before, and so you'll get students all reading at different times. Some will speed ahead and finish the novel in a couple of days, and others will still be reading it after 2 weeks. And so if I read it out to the class, I know where every single student is up to, and then I can set chapters for homework. So I might say, okay, we've read chapters 1 to 3 today. For homework, by the next lesson, you need to have read 4 and 5 or something like that. And that just helps to make sure we're getting through the novel quickly, but still that they're hearing it read out loud. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my students this coming term. I certainly wouldn't recommend it for every novel, because obviously if you're reading the whole lesson, it can get a little bit boring, but we'll mix it up with some activities that I'm going to go through in a minute as well to hopefully keep it exciting as we're reading. But I thought I would introduce the novel I'm going to teach to my class as well. So I'm going to do My Life as an Alphabet. I got recommended this book by another teacher at my school. My class has already read a couple of chapters at the end of last term, and so far they're really liking it. I'm very keen to read this novel with them. The only thing, like I said before, is that it is quite long, and so it will take us a little while to get through it. So that's why I'm going to, I guess, mix up my reading strategies, do some reading to the class, and then probably some chapters for homework as well, so that we can get through the novel and not spend weeks and weeks just reading it. But that's a strategy that I'm going to use this term. What I might end up doing is mixing it up and doing some reading groups as well, just so that we mainly keep at the same pace by reading to the class, and then we have some reading groups too, just so that it's not always my voice that the students are hearing. So that's probably all about how to structure the reading of the novel. If you've got any other ideas and how you like to structure in your class, please drop it in the comments below. I would love to hear. I'm always looking for new ideas when it comes to teaching novels, so please comment below if you've got any other ideas. But I've probably droned on enough about how to actually read the novel. Now let's talk about those sort of comprehension questions, reading logs, all those different strategies that you can do while students are reading to get them to actually remember what they're reading. So one of the strategies that I have used before, and that I know a lot of teachers still use, is reading logs. And so students will have a big long document and they have all the chapters written out, and then after they finish a chapter, they have to write a little summary of what that chapter was about. I have done that in the past, like I said before, and I found it somewhat effective. But I've found that a lot of students end up just writing a recount of the novel. And that's fine if you're going to do like a review kind of task where students write a little book review about the novel. But in my class, my students are going to be doing analysis. And so I really want them to remember the themes, ideas, and techniques that are used in the novel. And so a reading log isn't going to be suitable for them, because I don't just want them to be able to recount what happened. I want them to be able to tell me why and how the novel made them feel at different points, or what it made them think at different points. So I'm not going to be doing a reading log this time. What I'm going to do instead, I know it's a couple of strategies that I found really effective in the past, I'm going to be doing things called analytical races and then focused comprehension questions. So let's start with analytical races. So I use analytical races in all of my subjects, in all of my classes from year 8 to year 12. And I found that analytical races are a great way to get students excited about analysis, which doesn't happen super often. And so the way it works is maybe after a chapter or two, I will create a set of questions, maybe 5 or so questions, that the students need to answer. And so the students pair up, they each get given the set of questions, and then they have to race through the questions, answer them correctly, and the first pair to get them all right wins. So the questions will be stuff around analysis. There'll be questions like, on page 35, the technique of symbolism is used. Where is the symbol in this page? Or something like that. Or on page 20, we see the character characterized by the author. What personality traits do they have? Things like that. So getting the students to really think beyond what the plot is saying and looking at what techniques the author's using to present specific themes or ideas. So I'll do analytical races every few chapters just to keep the students engaged in the novel and really thinking about what they're reading. Obviously, when we're reading, whether it's me reading or students reading independently or in groups, they often can tune out and not really remember what it is that they're reading, or not really take note of what they're reading. And so using those analytical races, it just helps them to, I guess, solidify their understanding and check their understanding of what the author is saying in the novel. So that's something that I'm going to be using this term with my class. And then I'm also going to couple the analytical races with focused comprehension questions. So similar to an analytical race, but more comprehension focused, where they've got to find things or answer questions just in general. They might be more of those summary questions just so the students can remember the plot. But they also might be, I guess, analysis focused. And I'll probably do them maybe every 4 or 5 chapters, just so that they can make some notes for themselves about what's happened in the novel and how we are meant to be thinking or feeling at this point in the novel as the reader. And so by having those analytical races and those focused comprehension questions, it allows me to really guide the students to what I want them to be able to find in the novel. Like I said before, with a reading log, it's sort of a lot more open and the students just sort of write down whatever it is that they want to. But if you've got analytical races and those really focused comprehension questions, it allows you to really hone in on what it is you want the students to understand about the novel. So is it that you want them to understand a particular theme, a particular technique, message, anything like that? And so if you structure the questions in that way, it allows them to be really prepared for when they come to doing their final task, whether that is an analytical essay, which is what my students are going to be writing. Maybe they have to make a presentation, maybe they have to do a book review, whatever it is. I found that really focusing their attention on particular parts of the novel helps them when they are doing their final task. So I'm going to be using analytical races and those focused comprehension questions with my Life as an Alphabet novel. And hopefully that will mean that by the time the students come to do their assignment, they'll have a really deep understanding of the techniques, themes, and ideas in the text. Okay, so to finish off this video, let's just quickly go through some activities that you can use after reading the novel to really solidify the students' understanding and get them to, I guess, flesh out their knowledge a little bit more. So one activity you can do to check students' understanding of the characters in the text is a character brainstorm and a character poster creation. So the first thing that I would do is I'd get lots of A3 sheets of paper. I would write the different character names on them. I would give each table group one of those A3 sheets and lots of texters. And then what they need to do is they've got maybe a minute to write down as many things as possible about that particular character. So maybe it's things that happen to them in the novel, it might be the way they look, the way they act, anything about the character. Then we rotate the pages around the tables until each group has had a chance to write on every single character. Then what we do is whatever page each table is left with, they are tasked with creating the final poster of that character. So the first thing they need to do is draw what they think the character looks like, which is always very fun, seeing their interpretations of what the character looks like. Then they need to find key quotes that either describe the character or things that they say in the text that helps us to understand who they are. And then they can write down things like personality traits, relationships with others, anything about the character using that initial brainstorm that we did. And then what I like to do, after we've gathered all of those, they've each got their little drawings and their quotes and everything like that, I'll scan them and then I'll put them up on our learning management system so that we can use those character posters as a resource as we analyse the novel further. I do that activity with my year 8s all the way up to my year 12s, and I find it is so effective at helping them understand the different characters in the story. I got the idea from another teacher at my school, and ever since I saw him do it, I've done it with every single novel that I've taught. I'll pop in a couple of examples if I can find them just in this video so you can see what the sort of finished product looks like. But yeah, that's definitely one way you can get students to understand the characters in the novel. And then another thing you can do is a close reading of different passages from the novel. So I haven't decided whether I'm going to do sort of a modified version of this with my year 8s or not yet, but I definitely do close reading with my senior students to help them get that really deep analysis started. So what I do is I'll pick out different passages from the text that show different themes. And then what the students need to do is they need to read the passage, go through and highlight any techniques they see, and then they'll have a set of questions to answer as well. And so doing that close reading helps to, I guess, make analysing the novel feel a little bit more achievable, especially if you've got a really long text. So just giving them those little passages to analyse can help them refine their ideas and pick out the techniques, because it can be quite daunting if you're like, all right, off you go find the techniques in this 300-page novel and tell me what it's about. Whereas if you've got that close reading of passages that are really focused on a particular theme or a particular technique, it helps them to focus their analysis and I guess practice writing those real analytical sentences. So close reading is another thing I'll do with senior students, and I'll probably do some sort of modified version of it with my year 8s. It might just be more, we might do it as a class or something like that, because sometimes getting year 8 students to go off and analyze a text all by themselves doesn't always end well. So some form of close reading is a really good opportunity to get students to practice their analysis skills as well. And then the last thing you can do to get students to really unpack their understanding of the novel is some discussion around the themes or ideas. So what it is that the novel is really about at its core. So I do this in different ways depending on the year level. So with my senior students, we might just have a big discussion about themes and make a big mind map on the board or something like that, and they can just yell out what they think the novel is about. But definitely with middle school students, understanding themes is something that they struggle with, or that in my experience they struggle to understand. And so what I usually do is I'll pick out the themes for them. So I'll say, oh, you know, it's family, friendship, and coming of age in this novel. And then what we'll do is the students have big sheets of paper, like what we did with the character brainstorm, and they each have a theme on them, and the students have to discuss in their small table groups what they think the text is teaching us about that particular theme. And then again, we'd rotate all the papers again, so each student gets a chance to write about each theme. And I find doing it in that small group way is really effective, because students can bounce ideas off of each other, really get that conversation flowing about what they think the novel's about at its core, and really just chuck whatever it is that they think might be right on that page, and then you can help them refine their ideas later on. So with my year 8s this term, I'll probably do that small group theme brainstorm, then I'll bring it all back together as a class. I might pin up the brainstorming sheets on the board or something like that so we can all see them, and then we might refine the ideas together and come up with some nice sentences that explain what each theme is about, or maybe what the novel's trying to teach us about each theme. So that's what I'll do with my year 8s when we're studying My Life as an Alphabet. But like I said, there's lots of different ways that you can structure the analysis of the novel after you've read it, and obviously go with whatever you think is going to work for your class. Not every strategy is going to work for every class, but hopefully this video has given you some ideas of the kind of activities or strategies you can use when you are analysing the novel after you've read it. Okay, so I think that is all I wanted to cover today. Hopefully I have given you some ideas of how to teach a novel to your class. If you do have any questions though, or you think I've missed something, please drop me a comment below and I'll get back to you. But for now, good luck if you are teaching a novel to your class as well. Like I said at the start of this video, I used to find it so daunting, but now I actually love teaching novels because I feel like I've developed the strategies that I've found have worked for my classes. So good luck. But for now, thank you so much for joining me in this video, and I'll see you very soon in my next one. Bye.